Hi team, welcome back to our Introduction to Ancient Rome Anchor Fact series of printables and mini lessons. As we talked about last time, many people think that Julius Caesar was a Roman emperor, but he never was. He did try to make himself the Rex, the king of Rome, but he was assassinated on the Ides of March, 44 BC. The man who replaced him as the leader of Rome, his nephew Octavian, is the first person that historians recognize as a true emperor. He ruled as Augustus. Few works of art are more recognizable than the Augustan pose of this statue, a true Greco-Roman masterpiece. The statue shows Augustus as imperator, which means that he was the commander of the army. His armor is a work of art in itself, containing representations of the places he has conquered. At the bottom is a Cupid riding a dolphin, which is meant to symbolize Augustus's connection to Venus, the goddess of love. It also secretly makes the statue stronger by reinforcing the base. One of the most amazing things about great Greek and Roman sculptures is how the artists can make solid stone look like draped cloth. It almost looks light, even though it weighs hundreds of pounds. Augustus won the civil war that followed the death of Julius Caesar. As we saw in our Anchor Fact series on ancient Egypt, Cleopatra had become allies of Mark Antony after Caesar's death, and they were defeated by Augustus. She chose to kill herself instead of being captured and enslaved, as we see in this painting, with the Roman soldiers coming for her. From this point on, Egypt would be a Roman province, and Rome would continue to grow to swallow everything from Mesopotamia to England. Of this land, Augustus was the princeps, which means first citizen. He never had the title emperor. He had all the power of an emperor, but he never had an official title to say it. He was imperator, head of the army, princeps, first citizen, tribune, the protector of the plebeians, and pontifex maximus, chief priest of the Roman religion, among other things. Basically, the Romans liked to pretend that they were still a republic, even though they knew better. In this great work of art known as the Age of Augustus by Jean-Léon Gérôme, we see the obvious greatness of Augustus as the ruler of the known world. But the artist has captured something very important: the humble origin story of Christianity in the foreground, the story of the birth of Jesus in the manger during the Age of Augustus. As great as Augustus was as an emperor, we remember him as being the ruler of Rome from 27 BC to AD 14, or 14 AD. Some people prefer to write 27 BCE instead of BC, and 14 CE instead of 14 AD. But the whole point of choosing those years is that they mark the birth of Jesus and the beginning of the time when Christianity became the most important religion in the world. At Knowable World, we use BC and AD, even though we are a secular history curriculum, because the calendar is what it is, and it tells us something important. And the most important thing that happened during the Age of Augustus is not Augustus himself, but the story of Jesus. You don't have to be a Christian to understand that. Of course, for another 4,000 years, Rome was the most important empire in the world. So our story continues along those lines. But naturally, we will see that Rome eventually became Christian and that Christianity outlived Rome. As for the empire, there was a limit. Even Augustus could not conquer Germany, for instance. The most famous defeat of the Romans during his reign was the Battle of Teutoburg Forest. When the German tribes defeated the Romans, Rome would never conquer Germany. There would always be barbarians there. And eventually, they would help to bring down the Roman Empire. But during the Age of Augustus, things in Rome seemed to be at its peak. Virgil, the famous poet, wrote the Aeneid that we talked about in lesson 1 of this series, the story of Aeneas, the Trojan warrior who escaped the fall of Troy and came to what would become Rome. It was also during the Age of Augustus that the once famous historian Livy wrote his History of Rome, entitled From the Founding of the City. which is one of the most important documents that helps us to know Roman history. Literature, history, and art were an important part of the Age of Augustus. But there is no escaping the fact that Rome had changed, and not for the better. Now that one man was so completely in charge, the whole history of Rome would revolve around the question, who would be the emperor? See you next time as we explore the story and the limits of the Roman Empire.